think we're in Genesis out here. Genesis chapter 4, very important verse. Let's look in verse 25. If you'll look, first of all, let's go back to verse 16 through 24. That is the line of Cain. Now, you need to remember Genesis is a book of first, all right? It's the book of generations. It tells us why everything is the way it is now. Since you're dealing with the book of generations, you'll go through different lines of people, lines of genealogy. And also in First Chronicles, you can write this down, in First Chronicles chapter 1, you'll go through the genealogy of Adam's line to Noah. Then you'll have the sons of Ham, Shem. You'll have Ishmael. You'll have Abraham. So what Chronicles is it chronicles. You want me to close that door? Miss Faye? I'll take care of it. I promise.
I was fixing to put the coat back.
No. We'll take care of it.
I was fixing to shut that door and think that was what
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But what Chronicles? What do you want?
I said, how dare you leave that door open?
Oh. If you want some, you have to get up and get it yourself. But in Chronicles chapter 1, it's the exact same thing. Basically, it goes through the line. But if you look in Genesis chapter 4, the book in Cain's line, everyone is bad. Okay? Everyone, you have Tubal Cain, which is going to be found in verse 22. He is the first person to start using metal, and start using brass. You'll see how men now is starting to expand. Their knowledge is getting greater. Their workmanship is getting greater. You have the first, another murder is going to take place from the line of Cain. His name is Lamech, verse 23. And then in verse 24, you have also Lamech talking about being avenged. So in the line of Cain, nothing good comes out of it. All right? Now, but you'll see God's grace and God's mercy, because there is going to be a son that is going to be born. His name is Seth. Now, he is in the line of Christ. You can find that in the New Testament. Seth is in the same lineage of Jesus Christ. Now, remember, they had two boys, Cain and Abel. Abel's dead. You have Cain. Cain has been banished. He's a wanderer. He's a vagabond. He's gone. So now we have someone that is going to come in, and it is going to be Seth. Now, the one thing that Satan has always tried to do is stop the bloodline of Christ, right? He's always tried to get rid of it. He tried to get rid of it through Cain and Abel, having Abel killed. Cain is banished. So now she has another child, and that is where that bloodline is going to begin. Then you remember in the book of Exodus, Pharaoh killing all the male children. Of course, she hides Noah. And then you have Herod, King Herod the Great in the New Testament, trying to kill all the two and unders. So Satan's always trying to get rid of that line that is coming down, because you remember that God already warns the serpent or Satan back in Genesis that somebody is coming. Now, God is going to intercede. They're going to have a son. And it tells us in verse 25, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son. And it says, and she called his name Seth. For God, said she, hath appointed me another instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. She's still holding on to Abel, isn't she? Hasn't forgotten him. And if you'll ever notice that when you read about Cain, he's always going to be associated with doing something. What is he always going to be associated with doing? Murder. He's always going to be associated with that. So that is going to carry all the way up until 2018. We're still talking about it. Him murdering his brother. Now, something that is very important in verse 25. Is that 25 or 26? 26. This is something that we are doing now. All right. Now, before this, it does not say that they called upon the name of the Lord. Before this, they walked and they talked with God. You remember? It says they walked and talked with him in the cool of the evening. But when you get to verse 26, and it says, and to Seth, to him. All right. This is very important. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to do what? Call upon the name of the Lord. That is to invoke. That is to pray, to ask. That is where you get really your first prayer, to call upon the name of the Lord. And that is basically where you have proof, scriptural proof, that men are to worship God and to pray. So you'll see with Cain, he does not call upon the name of the Lord, does he? But we have another person by the name of Seth, and through his bloodline, men are starting to be worshipers of God. And now, even today, we still are. Okay? Now, when you get to I'm not going to bore you with all of chapter 5. It's just basically so-and-so begot so-and-so. All right? But I do want to go over some kind of interesting facts for you in chapter 5. Since we are dealing with the book of generations, from the time of the curse, which is the pivotal point in human history, from the time of the curse to the time of the flood, you're dealing with about 1,650 years, give or take. All right? The way you do that is you add up everyone's age here. Of course, when it says that Adam lived, if you look at verse 5, it says all the days of Adam were 930 years, and then he died. And then it tells us all the days of Seth were 912 years. You don't add those together and say, well, you got already 1,200 years there, or 1,800. You don't do that. You have to subtract or you get the difference of those years. Now, something very interesting. All right? Men lived 900 years was the average age. It's a long time. What's the average age now of a person? 60-ish to 100. In that ballpark. 900 years is the average age. Could you imagine, all right, living that long? All right? Now, you remember they are living in a fallen world. Every day they're struggling with temptation, right? Every day they are, you either call upon the name of Satan or you can call upon the name of the Lord. Remember, there's only two. So they're dealing with something that we don't have to deal with. You know, we're living in a world, we'll live here for, let's just say, 80 years. For us as Christians, we'll be taken up. They're having to struggle and to fight and to get by for 900 years in a world. And then we'll find out in chapter 6 what kind of world they're living in. Everything is corrupt. Now, how many people, that's the big question, how many people are living in this world that we're dealing with? All right? Now, the average age is about 900 years. All right? People start having kids around 90, between 60 and 90 years old is when they start, you look at it. That's basically the time they start having kids. We know that Noah had Ham, Shem, and Japheth. But the rest of them, it says that they had sons and daughters. Okay? If some of them would have kids all the way up until the age of 500. Sounds crazy. All right? What did God tell them? Be fruitful and multiply. If you are, now I know back a generation ago, it wasn't unusual for a family to have 15 kids. I couldn't deal. I would be absolutely stark raving crazy if I had to. How many you got? How many kids is in your family? How many brothers and sisters?
There's four. But my grandmother was one of 23.
And she lived. How old? When was?
She died in her 60s.
Okay. So from the time she started bearing children, we don't know when her first child. How old was? You know how old she was when her first?
My grandmother was one of.
She was one of. So.
And there was two wives. The first one didn't have a son.
So 23. Let's just say 23. They had 23.
17 by the first.
All right, and the average age back then was a lot less than now. Okay, I mean, we went up to Pigeon Ford or Gatlinburg. We went to Cades Cove, and there's a little sign there that basically said, "You got sick, you lived back here, you died." All right, so so if you are living back during the time of Adam, all right, and you start having kids around 60 years old, which sounds odd, I know, and you're having kids all the way up till about 500. many kids you gonna have? That family. You gonna be worried, huh?
We'll have a whole
A bunch. All right. You're gonna be pulling up in a wagon to church with 5 wagons full of kids. All right. Now that's one family. That's just one. All right. They get married. Those kids get married, have kids. Those kids get married, have kids. You see how it starts multiplying? They think if you can live to be 900 years old and have a bunch of kids, enough to fill your own corporation, at the time of the flood, you're dealing with maybe between 2 and 5 billion people. Billion. How many people are living in China today? China has got over 2 billion people. That's one country. And we've only been around, and they, the average age of a Chinese person is probably about 80 years old. And they're only limited to so many kids. Okay? So if you're not limited to so many kids, you're living 900 years, it's very possible. So the population has exploded like that. Now, so the average life, 900 years. Now, when you're dealing with this, it will say that so-and-so began to have kids at a certain age, and then it will go through his lineage. I don't know if any of you guys are into genealogy where you trace your family tree. What you have to understand is this. These people overlap one another. All right? You know that Seth was still alive when Abraham died. If you add up the math. When Abraham died, Seth is still alive. So everybody starts overlapping everyone. All right? If you're living 930 years and somebody else is living 800 years, you've overlapped them over 100 years. So these people, it's not that they died and then somebody else took their place. They're all living in the same type of area. All right? So we don't know if they knew each other. We don't know if Seth told Abraham, let me tell you about this flood we had one time. Okay? We don't know, but what we are given is the length of the age, who these people are, and the command that they obeyed to go be fruitful and multiply. And you'll see how God's grace and mercy is because you have a man by the name of Seth. He has a kid, and they start calling upon the name of the Lord. All right? Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but me and Crystal had 2 kids. You cannot throw a third one at me. It's not going to happen. If I lived 900 years, I'd have 2 kids because I couldn't deal with 3. All right? Now, there is something very interesting. All right? You start dealing with people like Methuselah, people like with Enoch. If you go to verse 24, now the Old Testament is primarily a Jewish testament. Okay? The Old Testament. It is dealing with one group of people only. It is the nation of Israel, right? God's chosen people. It focuses on Exodus. It focuses on the Promised Land, living in the Promised Land, overcoming obstacles in the Promised Land. It deals with the nation of Israel, not a Gentile nation. It deals with the nation of Israel going into Babylonian, Assyrian captivity. It deals with the minor prophets dealing with just Israel. The minor prophets and major prophets never spoke to Gentiles. It was always to God's people. All right? The book of Matthew is much the same. That is a Jewish book. Okay? You really start getting into the Gentile aspects of the Bible when you start dealing with Acts onward. But from Genesis to Matthew, you're dealing with Israel. You're dealing with Hebrews. But you also see glimpses in the Old Testament of the rapture. Okay, one of the greatest things that's going to happen. I know we studied this, a long time ago. I mentioned this man, and it says there is a man in verse 24. Do you know who who is one man that cheated the undertaker? It's Enoch, Moses, and there's one more. Elijah. They cheated the undertaker. All right. Now you have a man by the name of Enoch, and it just basically tells us that he walked with God. Okay. Now what is interesting is he is coming out of this lineage of Seth. Because it tells us that Adam, and then he has Seth, and then Seth has a child, and then the child that Seth, and it just goes on. All right? So we have this individual by the name of Enoch, and he walked with God. Because the reason he walked with God, if you go back to chapter 4, is because people started calling upon the name of the Lord. Okay? out of every thing that Satan does to try to disrupt Christ, God, and their plan, God can trump that, or the providence of God can overturn that. Because now we have people that are calling upon the name of God, and we have people by the name of Enoch who is walking with God. Now, in chapter 5, what is the great event that's going to happen? Y'all can look over there and find out. About a big boat. Chapter 6. What is the big event that's going to happen? It's got a boat in it.
Flood.
All right. Should have went wrong. Flood. Now, some people do not believe in symbolism in the Bible. Some people do. I'm kind of in the middle. I think sometimes you can delve too much into it and make something when it's not. But I think that God does put symbolisms in the Bible. Joseph is symbolic of Christ. Some people will take symbolisms and just kind of take them to a different level that's kind of odd. This is how I agree. This is what I think, all right? Enoch walked with God. He did not die, correct. He was just, and it tells us, and it says, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not. He did not die, for God took him. He is just gone. Let's just say that the rapture happens. Do we die? Or are we taken up? We're taken up. We don't die. We're taken up. Do you know what Enoch is a type of? Church. The rapture, the church. Because what event's fixed to take place in chapter 6? The flood. And who are the only people that are going to be saved from the flood? Now, they are not Jews, but they will come out of the lineage of Abraham. Noah is a type of the Jew being saved during that tribulation time of the flood. Where's Enoch at? He's gone. We're a type of Enoch. Enoch is a type of the church because he walked with God and then he was no more because God took him. Some people will disagree with that. If you do, whatever, great. But it says, and Enoch walked with God. Last person that walked and talked with God was a man by the name of Adam. Remember, he said he walked with God in the cool of the day and talked with him. So, and it says he walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Now, something very interesting. Go to verse 30. And Lamech lived after he begot Noah 595 years, and begot sons and daughters. So there you have that again, a bunch of kids, a bunch of them. I think the guy that works with me, Beecher, he has 1, 2, 3. I think he's got 8. There was 8 of those. Okay, 23. So, wow. And but probably that was not a whole lot of kids. There was probably some that had more than that, a lot more. But you're living 900 years. You have a bunch of kids, a bunch of diapers. Okay, now. And then it tells us, and it says that Noah was 500 years old. And he starts having kids at 500. Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Okay, so you're going to have Noah, his wife, Ham, Shem, Japheth, and their daughters, or their wives. Okay, now, if we have that type of population, okay, if we have 500,000 or 500 million or a billion, whatever, okay, that's a lot of people. Okay, now you're living in a time now in chapter 6. You'll see how when Satan tempted Eve, it didn't really seem like that big of a deal, did it? Just take the fruit and eat it. No big deal. Your eyes are going to be like God. Doesn't really seem like that big of a deal. All those years pass. All those centuries, all those people die. And then it says, and it came to pass, look in verse 1, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. Multiply means quick. Okay, in the Hebrew it means one after the other. So that's why I can kind of agree with that estimate of people being on the earth, because it says they begin to multiply as quickly, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. You're living 900 years, I can see that. Okay? Began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. Why does it say anything about sons? You're absolutely correct. Sons can't have kids. So ladies, you're held in high praise. Daughters are going to be born unto them. More daughters are going to be born than sons. It says they began to multiply on the face of the earth. The known earth at that time. Okay? And daughters were born unto them. That the sons of God saw the daughters of men. Now, this is when it gets kind of iffy. People always want to know who are those people. Because it tells us they are sons of God. All right? And it says, and the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. All right? Now we've got to read verse 3 to figure out who these people are. Or verse 4. Let me get my eyes are starting to bug out on me. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with men. For that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be how many? 120. Before then it was what? 900. So God is going to drastically cut down the age, right? Now, and there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, that they bare children to them, and they became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Let's go back. There were giants in the earth those days. Does it tell us that the sons of men that married the daughters was the cause of those giants? Huh? Does it tell us that? All right? But they were, now, when you think of giants, you think of who's the big giant we think of in the Bible? Goliath. But if you look at the word giants in Hebrew, it doesn't mean height. It means knowledge. And it also tells us that they were men, some mighty men which were of old. All right? If I take a man that is 80 years old, that has lived a full life, and I take a kid that's 12 years old, and I want to get some knowledge from either one of them, who am I going to go to? The old man. Why? He's lived longer. He knows more. I'm not going to go to a kid and find out this thing. I'm going to go to this older gentleman. And it says, which were men of old, men of renown. Once again, that the word giant's not talking about gigantic people. It's talking about head knowledge. If you live 900 years, you're going to get pretty smart. You're going to learn a whole bunch in 900 years, right? I mean, my Christopher's 13, and he knows more about these things and computers and all that than I'll ever know. He's just 13. So if you're living 900 years, you're getting more knowledge, aren't you? And it tells us, now we got to go back. And it says when they begin to multiply, the sons of God. Now, when you're dealing with this, you remember in the book of Jude, and you're also dealing with the book of Revelations, we talked about it. When Satan was cast out of heaven, what did he take with him? It tells us in the book of Revelations that his tail drew. Angels that rebel. All right? Guess who's on the face of the earth at this time? You say, well, they can't be on the earth. Where was Satan at when he tempted Eve? Was he in hell? He was on the earth. You study the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Do you know there are two, I don't want to say miracles, there are two problems that Jesus Christ deals with more than any problem when he's on the earth. That is the problem. There's one miracle that he does more than any is blindness. He opens more eyes than anything. And there's another problem he deals with more than anything. It's demons. Remember the madman of the Gadarenes? Every time he went into a synagogue, there was somebody in there possessed. And it tells us early in his public ministry that they brought all their sick and the diseased and demon possessed. Okay? And it says, and it came to pass when men began to multiply, one after the other, quick, that the sons of God, I believe it is dealing with demonic people, demonic spirits. When the sons of God saw that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, they're on the earth to see them. You're not dealing with heavenly angels and stuff in the realms. Okay? saw that the daughters of men were fair, they took them wives, all of which they chose. And the Lord, this is when the Lord says, you can't have no more of this. My spirit's not going to be. Do you know when that's going to happen? Do you know there's going to be one thing taken out of this world when we're poured up? Who said that? Holy Spirit. It's going to be gone. Right now, God's Spirit is where? He is still, thank God He's still with us, the Holy Spirit. But He tells us, He said, my spirit shall not always strive or get along or walk with mankind. For that He is also flesh. And that is so true. I mean, our lives are like this, isn't it? I mean, we're thinking, people live 900 years. Man, that's a long time. But in the eyes of God, it's like that, isn't it? We think 80 years is a long time, but in the eyes of God, He tells us, He said, you're just flesh. He even tells us in Ecclesiastes, He tells us in Proverbs, He tells us in Psalms, that man, life is it's like a vapor. It's here and then it's gone. It's like when you crank your truck tonight or your car tonight, it's so cold out there, that exhaust is going to come out and it's that smoke. It's going to last, 2 seconds? It's like our lives. But He says, my spirit's not always going to be with man for their flesh, but his days is going to be 120 years. He's going to limit. He's going to cut down on that drastically. Now, there were giants in the earth those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, that they bare them children, and the same became very intelligent, knowledgeable. Is Satan stupid? Who did Satan know to go to when he was dealing with Adam and Eve? He knew who to go to, didn't he? They became very intelligent. They were mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Now, this is something that is interesting. The population's exploded. People's having kids left and right. Okay? God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth. What is amazing how everything now, in just 2 or 3 chapters, has went from take this apple and eat it, you're going to be fine. And God kicks them out of the garden, and we're thinking, what's the big deal? Now, all she did was just disobey God once. He tells them one time, don't eat of that tree. Okay, she does it, and the world will look at this and go, what kind of God are y'all serving? That He gets so bent out of shape over one sin. 2 or 3 chapters later, how is the world described? Wickedness. Starts off with eat this apple, and then generations of people's having kids, and they get more wicked and more wicked and more wicked. And then it says that God saw the wickedness of man was not only just wicked, but it was great. Great means in capital. Everywhere. Okay? And that everything they did. Now you'll notice that it's not in actions. It says every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was on evil continually. Does it say that they was committing these actually physically or thinking about it? It says everything they thought from the time they got up to the time they went to bed, everything was what? Evil. It was wicked. Just their thoughts. You go from God calling upon, men starting to call upon the name of the Lord, and now you've got that everybody in the world, we're going to find out it's not true, but there's one man that found grace in the eyes of God. But every person on the earth, and we think it's bad now. Okay, at least we've got law and some order, and if something happens, we can pick up 911. They'll be out there in a few. Back then, there was no law. It was every man for himself. If we think it's bad now, what was it like this? And do you know what this is a type of? When the church is poured out during those 7 years, the world is going to be just like it was back before the flood. Everything that has happened, God saw that the wickedness of man was great, and that everything he thought about, only in his thoughts and only in his heart, was always on evil every moment of the day. And it repented the Lord. I mean, how many chapters was it since Eve ate that apple? Look how bad it's went. From her eating that apple to God thinking, what have I done? I've got to do something. I've got to get rid of these people. Do you see how sin, there's a song by the Cathedral Quartet. It says sin will take you further than you want to go, and that is absolute truth. One, we call them white lies and little sins. They're not going to hurt anybody. But you know what I mean? We went from eat this apple to God going, I've got to get rid of all these people. I've got to do something. And if you think about it, do you know that when it says that back in chapter 5, it says that so-and-so lived and he lived to be 900, and then so-and-so lived. It's only 10 generations. Look how bad it's got. To where God's going, man, what have I done? These people's rough. But it says, and it repented the Lord that he had made man on earth, and it grieved him in his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man. A few chapters ago, what was God doing with Adam? Walking and talking in the cool of the evening in the garden. Now God's going, I'm going to kill all of them. I will destroy. Destroy doesn't mean just to kill them. It means to virtually wipe them off the face of the earth. Erase them from memory. Get rid of them. Nothing else. We've got to get rid of all these people. Remove the memory of them. Remove any trace of these people. All right? It says, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. When it says that God repented, when we think of repent, we think of somebody that is sinning, right? It's not what God's talking about. It's not that he said, well, I've made a mistake. When God made Adam, do you think he knew what was going to happen? He knew. Okay, he's God. I think what it means, and I've looked in several commentaries, that God knew everything that was going to happen, but still it grieved him. When Jesus Christ chose Judas, he knew the moment he said Judas. And listen, every disciple that Jesus chose, do you know that Jesus Christ had to go up to him and go, will you follow me? Yeah, I'll follow you. When he goes up to Judas Iscariot and says, will you follow me? Jesus Christ knew he's going to stab me in the back. But I'm still going to do it. God knew that man was going to turn to every thought, everything in his heart, everything that he could imagine is going to be evil, but yet he still did it. But yet it still made God grieve to his heart. You know, it'd be sad if the Bible ended at verse 7. God killed them all, end of story. But I want to finish with this. And this is my, if somebody says, what kind of preacher you want to be known as? I always want to be known as a grace preacher. Because it said, and Noah found what? Grace. That's what kind of God we serve. Every imagination, everything on everybody's heart is wicked. God said, I've got to destroy them. I want to destroy not only man, but anything. Basically, God says anything that can take a breath, that can breathe, has blood flowing through its vein, has a heartbeat, I want to kill it. We often think that he saved some things that was not in this boat. It's all gone. Every bit of it. And we see God's judgment. And we see how God does not tolerate sin. And we see the righteousness of God there. But also, during all of this chaos, we see the grace of God, don't we? And it says, and Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Dear Heavenly Father, we love you and thank you. We thank you, dear God, that you're a God of grace and mercy. Dear God, I know that things seem bad now here on this earth. But one day, and you tell the disciples that I'm going to go to prepare a place. And if I go to prepare a place, I'm going to come back, that where I am, you're going to be. We long for that day, dear God. But while we are here, dear God, on this earth, help us to keep in mind that our sole purpose as a Christian is to tell others about Jesus Christ. Help us, dear God, not only to watch and wait, but to be prepared. For the prayer requests we heard, dear God, we lift them up to you. In your name we pray. Amen. There you go.